in here today and tomorrow. I am the Bulldog, and joining us now on the West Her Hotline, you know him, you love him, former Bills center, host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast, and the Bills radio color analyst, heard right here on the flagship WGR Sports Radio 550. He is Eric Wood. Good afternoon, Eric. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
I'm doing well. How did yesterday's game feel to you as it was going on? Because I felt like it was maybe one of the most annoying games of the year to me, because I never really respected Cleveland as a team that could be a real threat. But, you know, suddenly we're halfway through the fourth quarter and it's a 3-point game and I'm giving them the ball back. I'm like, what is happening here? What did you make of the overall yesterday?
Yeah, I'm with you. We've been begging for hotter starts on offense. We start off the first 3 drives with 3 touchdown runs. Now they scored on their first drive as well. But I'm with you. It just wasn't that big of a concern, especially as the first half is unfolding. The Bills are up 21-10. They botched that field goal attempt before the end of the half, and you're like, all right, they're the Browns. Here we go. We're getting the ball after the half. We'll get back to rolling. We had one possession where we didn't score, and that was, the Josh Allen retreat and injury and that fiasco. But other than that, we were moving the ball at will on them, so you just assumed this is going to be a runaway here in the second half, and surely wasn't. The Bills go 3 and out on their last possession of the first half, and then essentially go 3 and out or turnover on downs the remainder of the game. One of the 3 and outs results in 3 points based upon the interception by Daquan Jones. But frustrating day. The defense comes up big again in the second half where they were able to make some adjustments. And, yeah, it was a fairly annoying game. And, the Cleveland opening drive touchdown, they have a reverse, they have an end around, a bunch of check down throws, 2 play action rollouts, get Shedeur in space, and it's like, okay, we'll shut this down. And for the most part, they did. Now, I felt like early on they were giving Shedeur too many just bailout throws on checkdowns to where, he wasn't going to push the ball down the field. It seemed like he was confused as he scanned the field. And so we were giving him too many checkdowns or outlet passes. Once we took those away, really were able to shut down their offense outside of a couple timely screen plays that they had against our blitzes. But, to me, I would say annoying as well, because you thought this is a runaway. Trubisky gets some action. Let's get out of here healthy. Let's gear up for the Eagles and, hopefully coast through the Jets and move on to the postseason. But it got a lot more interesting, just like these last few have.
Right. How it's another game where the run defense has problems. I mean, the Browns went over 160 yards on the ground. I don't know that I've ever asked you about their run defense specifically as I'm about to now, Eric, because I feel like it's a thing that is constantly brought up because it's bad, right? You see the totals, the first half of the Atlanta game, just different games this year where they just cannot stop teams. Tampa Bay, another game.
They were a holding call away from Judkins having a big run in that game too.
Sure. But yet, I feel like even in the games where it's been bad and the Bills lost, it's stabilized enough. Like, I wouldn't say the run defense lost them the game in Atlanta as much as the Bills offense just couldn't get off the mat in the second half of that game. They limited the Falcons to only a field goal. I wonder if the run defense just makes fans feel worse because it's emasculating in a way to watch your team get run over and not be able to tackle. But in the big scheme of things, I don't feel like it's something that's gotten them beat this year very often.
No, it hasn't. I mean, the biggest concern to me is that we give up explosive runs, and Nate's right. That holding call wiped out an explosive that Cleveland had yesterday. But for the most part, it's the explosives that are just backbreaking to where, most teams don't get many 60-plus yard runs, but I feel like it's every other week where, we have a bad fit at the third level of the defense, or it starts with up front, and then the safety doesn't fit correctly, and boom, there's 65 yards, there's 55 yards. These huge chunk plays are a serious issue, based upon the way our defense has been built over the years and generally having a top 5 scoring offense. you're assuming, okay, we're likely to be playing the lead a lot of times. We're going to have a great back end of our defense. We mix and match coverages, but this year the explosives have just come at an obnoxious rate. Like, thinking back to previous years, I can pinpoint the games where those came. The Jonathan Taylor game at home,
right?
You can pinpoint those, and I feel like this year they're just coming at a much higher pace. Whether that's maybe some speed issues on the back end of the defense, playing well, but, a Jordan Poyer who maybe at this point of his career can't run somebody down, a Tre'Davious White who at this point of his career may not be able to run somebody down, but it's the explosive runs that are killers. Now, give them credit. They generally buck up at some point throughout the game and shut the run down, whether that's teams having to abandon the run or they stud up against it.
I want to, just as a follow-up, part of what I see, especially from the linebackers, but it's not exclusive, Eric, to the linebackers, the term guessing comes up a lot, and it does look like when they are filling gaps, they're trying, and part of playing linebacker in not just the NFL, but playing linebacker is guessing where the play is going, meeting them in the hole and stopping it. But on that play, Shaq Thompson's getting held. Shaq Thompson's out of position. And they got bailed out with a holding call, but to me, it looks like there's way too much guessing going on, and I don't know if that's a coaching thing, if it's a preparation thing, a mixture of both, but it looks like maybe we know what the answers to the test are, but let's just hope we're in the right position.
No, I think that's a fair point. So, there have been times this year. So we're a gap-based defense, and I know you guys hear Sean McDermott say that all the time. For those listening that don't understand that, our defensive linemen are generally shooting up the field in their gap. The linebacker's responsible for his gap, and then the safety fills in amongst that, and then the corners generally have the edges of the defense, and that's why we generally want corners that can tackle really well. So when linebackers shoot gaps, like when we would play the Carolina Panthers back in the day in the Sean McDermott defense, you had Thomas Davis, you had Luke Kuechly, and you had Shaq Thompson. Well, they shot backdoor all the time, and they had so much speed to recover, and you're thinking, why can he do this? Well, that was his gap. He's shooting it. The three technique's still in his spot, so he can shoot this gap. Where I see some issues, especially this year, is especially on the interior, guys getting washed way out of their gaps. Okay, now we have a backer that generally can shoot that gap behind it thinking, hey, here comes my tackle for loss. Well, then he looks like a fool when the gap goes in between them. And I don't want to oversimplify it because there's been many issues with the defense. Teams have gotten us with motions where the gap moves based upon an extra blocker to one side, and we don't fit it correctly. And, the converse of that is, the teams that play with bigger slug type defensive tackles, bigger ends, a thicker five technique type, and they're trying to two gap, and then their backers play off of those gaps. Generally, in our system, it's a one gap. You're playing it, and it's mono football, and we're not winning those matchups consistently, I'll say.
And I do think, Eric, that does speak to the archetype of defensive tackle that you've seen the Bills kind of consistently draft and go after. They are one gap players, and they've never really had a true, kind of man-eating two gap one tackle nose tackle. And even I've been actually pretty impressed. Deion Walker this year didn't really, to me, flash NFL goods as a one tack, as a bigger kind of man-eating it. He has, I think, been one of their most steady guys on the inside, has shown more one tech ability than I thought he was going to have coming in the NFL. But I guess short of the fact of the matter is, Eric, is they're not changing this concept now, and or they haven't, and they're not going to do it going into the playoffs.
This is their defense.
This is what they've got. So for what they've got personnel wise, I think it was a little bit of an eye raiser for me seeing Larry Ogunjobi out of the lineup, as he hasn't really been great for them, but he is one of their bigger interior defensive linemen, and yesterday they are got to be one of the smallest groups in the league playing yesterday with that group at defensive tackle.
No, you're right. And Deion Walker is 6'7", 340 pounds. That's what he's listed at. But at times, 6'7" can get you washed.
Yep.
Because we're shooting for hips. On our double teams, someone stands them up, we're shooting for a hip. It becomes really difficult to move a just fire hydrant out there that's 6 foot, 330
Puna
pounds.
Ford type, yeah.
Yeah, you give me a guy who's 6'7", they're going to make their plays, and they're probably a little tougher to go against in the pass because they're long arms and this and that. But we're going to be able to get some movement on those guys generally, and that's where you've seen Deion Walker at times get washed, 2-3 gaps out of his gap. Now, I'll say this. We've gotten more splash plays out of him on the interior than maybe anyone else this season. Ed Oliver, obviously not being in the lineup and Hoyt being out and all that. Not that Hoyt would on normal down distance necessarily be playing on the interior affect those reps. But, I do think Deion Walker has been disruptive at times in getting those tackles for loss. And so to me, they're undermanned on the defensive side of the football. I think it's really hurt our defense that Terrell Bernard has dealt with injuries this season and hasn't had the mobility. Matt Milano isn't quite the athlete he was at one time. That's where you see Shaq Thompson come in and play a little more physical brand of ball. He's brought something to the table. Dorian Williams as well in their base defense looks, but they're going to more base defense because they understand, with our limitations up front right now based upon injury, we need bigger bodies at that second level to try and hold up because, those offensive linemen aren't struggling as much to get to the second level because of some of those injuries.
Former Bills center and current radio color analyst on the Buffalo Bills radio network, Eric Wood, on the West Her Hotline with us, part of our Buffalo Football Monday coverage each and every week here. We do tend to, I'm guilty, anyone that does this job is guilty of sort of focusing and picking at the things that were problematic in the game. We began this conversation with me describing the game as annoying. The Bills improved to 11-4 with the win. How about Greg Rousseau? Find something positive here. Not only did you get plays, which, you've gotten a, fair share of plays. The guy got paid for a reason here. This year, I think with the contract in mind, he's sort of been in the center of a lot of fans' ire because there haven't been game impacting plays from him. We hear about his pass rush win rate and how good he is on, run defending on a team that's terrible in general defending the run. I have trouble really figuring out what to do with that. But yesterday were game-altering plays. I mean, it's a fourth down sack. It's a grounding call that ends a drive ostensibly. I mean, he was the most impactful player on the defense, and if it wasn't him, maybe it was Jordan Poyer.
No, I agree with that. And to me, pass rush win rate doesn't always translate to sacks. That could be a quicker pass where they're planning to get the ball in their hands quickly. And again, going back to right now, the limitations that they have on the interior, there's generally somewhere to step up in the pocket. So even if he wins off the edge, there's generally room to step up. We used to always say as an O-line group, it generally takes two guys winning to get a sack to where, one guy flushes the quarterback and the other guy won as well, and boom, there's your sack. So as long as two of us don't get beat, we shouldn't be giving up a whole bunch of sacks. Now, there's exceptions. I understand that. But for the most part, that's how it happens. So to me, Greg Rousseau was paid like a top 15 to 20 defensive end. In 3 years from now, where he's still on that contract, he'll be a top 40 probably paid defensive end. And for my money, he can play like that. He's great against the run. You don't often see – generally, when you see the runs go off the edge, it's not at him. Teams are game planning away from outside runs at him for the most part. And to me, he has had a nice season. When Bosa injured his wrist, his pass rush win rate went considerably down, and that's where we've seen less sacks. And then with Hoyt being out, Ed Oliver being out, we're not getting much up the middle, and that's where you've seen the Bills have to resort, especially in the second half, to a much higher blitz rate.
Eric Wood on the West Her Hotline with us. On the other side of the ball, Eric, maybe before the game even started, I don't know how you guys addressed this during your roundtable portion of pregame, but seeing Gabe Davis and Keon Coleman inactive was pretty jarring to me. And considering what that leaves you at, it's like they couldn't wait to get McCole Hardman back in the lineup. He ends up being on the field for 2 special team snaps, and that's all. Brandon Cooks with another big drop. I don't. Do you have even a guess as to what is happening with Coleman? Was disciplined earlier in the year and came back, and there's nothing really good happening there. But I don't know that he's, a problem still within the, the meetings and all the stuff, being on time and whatnot. I really felt like when Davis was healthy, that maybe became a 1-for-1 swap. Seeing them both inactive, like I said, was kind of jarring. What were your thoughts on the choices the Bills made with their receiver room yesterday?
Yeah, I honestly think they're trying to figure out if they have something in Brandon Cooks, and after him having 2 awful drops these last 2 weeks on game plan specific play action plays that are set up, that I don't know where that goes from here. Maybe you give him another shot, but I think you're still trying to figure out what you got in him. With McCole Hardman, you're trying to see, do we have somebody that can impact in the punt return game, where I think second worst in the league in punt return yardage. So do we have something there? Figure out if you have something with McCole Hardman there. And then Shakir's got to be up. Shavers has got to be up, just based upon he's a core 4 special teamer. And he plays meaningful minutes, obviously, on offense, and he had a nice catch yesterday. But, there's Coleman and Davis likely are not your core 4 special teamers. And so he's going to be up. And then you're trying to figure out what you got in Josh Palmer. And, I still think he's likely your best route runner and separator. Injuries have hampered that and everything else, but, extremely limited yesterday. And moving forward, I'm not saying the Bills weren't taking the Browns serious and saying, hey, we're just going to experiment at wide receiver and see what we got in Cooks and Hardman. I would be very surprised this upcoming week if Gabe Davis or Keon Coleman. I don't think we'll see them both down this week. I hope that answered the question correctly.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to this receiver conversation, because, we do have a scheduled allotment. We do have to get to receiver questions in the segment at the station. But
they beat us if we don't do it, Eric.
Right,
it's awful.
Yeah, this is not our fault.
Yeah, I hear you. That's where you guys make the most headways.
That's right.
That's where you make the national headlines.
I look at how this offense, Eric, has evolved over the last few weeks, and we're seeing as much, if not more, of the 3 tight end sets and more Reggie Gilliam. And this is right now, and I think rightfully so, an offense, a passing offense that runs through the tight ends and the running backs. And I'm wondering how much of the issues of getting the ball to receivers, I saw a Matt Harmon stat about separation. It does look like Palmer is still the team's best separator. And I'm just wondering when they are separating, other than the as you called it, like the designed plays that have been going to Cooks. How is it to you a little too? The scheme seems to be more so building and built around them moving more towards a scheme that values and maybe amplifies the use of running backs and tight ends in the pass game and away from the wide receivers. And if that's the case, like, how do they find open receivers, I guess is where I'm trying to get to. Because if there are separating, and I think Palmer is separating, I think, Brandon Cooks is separating. How does this offense utilize receivers enough so that it's not such a talking point each and every week?
Yeah, I mean, the goal would be maybe you don't have to. And the only reason I say that is yesterday's passing numbers are likely not much of a conversation if Knox doesn't drop the touchdown, James Cook doesn't drop the play-action pass out of the backfield, Cooks drops the ball along the sideline, Dalton Kincaid is called not a catch, looked like his toe came down inbounds, and then Josh has the overthrow on the Shakir, which was a beautiful play concept. We run mesh almost. We run mesh all the time. He looks like he's going to run it. He breaks back out. He's completely wide open. It's not a pick or anything. It's hard to get that much separation. And so all that being said, we might not be even having this conversation if we hit 3 of the 5 of those, much less we should have hit all 5. And so to me, hopefully – this is a recipe that can work. There's times where, yesterday I felt like Cleveland was just daring us to take a shot down the sideline.
A lot of single high.
We're going to give you single high with press man every single time. And whether it's a Josh Allen maybe trust issue or trying to stay on schedule or whatever that is, we're just not taking those shots right now. You'd love to say if we need it, we can. But, right now the recipe we got, if guys make plays, I think it's a winning formula when you have maybe the best running back in football, an incredible offensive line, a great group of tight ends, a great complementary group of running backs. Like, I don't know. I think that's a recipe that can make it work. But I will say this: I'd like to see, obviously, production on the outside because you think, okay, well, we're going to get in a playoff game and we need to see it.
Right. Real quick thought on the Eagles before we part ways for the week, Eric.
It'll be a fun matchup. Run defense better show up because they're going to come in and I'm sure try and play smash mouth football. It's a very talented defense. I mean, Bulldog, we talk every week. I mean, and half the time I'm trying to talk everyone off a ledge. Like, look around the league. There's not many happy fan bases right now. Maybe there's, you know what I mean? Like
Jacksonville
fans
maybe,
are fired
yeah.
up right now, but now Denver fans think they stink. Oh, we've won a bunch of one-score games, and you know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
I mean, you look over at Philadelphia, they're, switching play callers and the whole works. That's happening around the league, and they're an example as well. But when you look at overall talent, they got plenty of it over there.
Yeah, there was a moment a couple of weeks ago when I would have legitimately answered they're the best team in the league, and it wasn't based on the form they were in. It was more like the receivers they've got, the tight end, the quarterback, defense. Like, I think that's a complete looking team that just doesn't look like the wires are all connecting the way they should. And I just always think a team like that will probably figure it out, but they don't have to. I mean, they didn't 2 years ago. They did last year, of course. They eventually did. All right, Eric, thanks for this. Any special plans or just a quiet Christmas at home in Louisville?
No, we just host at our house, so we'll have family all come over and we'll do it big with the kids in the morning and all that. How about you guys? Anything special?
Pretty laid back. My parents, 92 and 91, will be hosting a traditional Polish Christmas Eve dinner. So, like, that is something we really look forward to. We help out a little more than we used to, but still, it's at their house, the house I grew up in. So that's a real treat. And then Sunday, my wife's family comes over, and I don't have to get out of pajamas if I don't want to. Or not Sunday, but Christmas Day, I mean. Like, it's the best.
Yeah. Nice.
I'll be there. I'll actually be at the game Sunday. I'm going with my dad. It's for my birthday. So every year I usually do a game with the dad. So I'll be in the stands texting you angry things, Eric. So be ready.
I was just gonna say this is your annual out of the booth, enjoy yourself at a Bills game.
Yeah, but
Maybe I don't. Get one of those
but
one day.
I don't get to tweet because the internet connection. So what I usually tweet, I then have to send to Eric as additional material for him during the game.
Well, I love it because I like using your tweets on the broadcast, anyways.
What a team, Eric! Thanks for this. Enjoy the holidays. It's a great time with the kids being the age yours are. We appreciate this, and we'll talk next week.
Absolutely, looking forward.